the rest of this session is being recorded, and you will be able to consult the recording soon later. What I'm going to do is once the lecture's over, I download the file that's produced by Blackboard, and then I upload it to YouTube, and I will post on the course website under a separate content folder the files for these lectures, so that you can go back and look at it, or if you miss a lecture, you can go and watch the lecture that you missed. So you can look to that later today and for the rest of the semester. So I want to turn now directly to take a look at the professor's addendum, and I want to highlight a number of features on the addendum that are important for you to understand and to be clear about. Okay, so I guess the first thing to mention is that the professor's addendum, you can find the professor's addendum, and I think that it's worth your while. I think it's important even that you download the professor's addendum, and that file you can find in course information. It's the only file in that tab. It'll be on the left side of your screen, and you download the file. Among other things, it has my email address, and so if you ever need to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me at that email address. The next important item that I want you to see is now what? Okay, here we go. The textbook for this course is, this is the title, SOC Plus, and the author of the textbook is Robert Brim. Robert Brim is a full professor at the University of Toronto. He is a prominent sociologist whose work is known around the world. He's a big deal in sociology. And he also has written a lot. He's done a lot of textbook writing. So he's there's that. If any of you, when you graduate from Seneca, go on to pursue an undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto, if you take a sociology course, you might end up taking a course from Bob Brim, and he is. I've met him a couple of times. He's a very nice person, knowledgeable, and judging from his the information available about him on the University of Toronto website, he's also an excellent teacher. So his textbook is the textbook that we will be using this semester and next semester. Now, I want to point out an important detail that you might not have caught, might not have noticed. We're using the 4th edition. That's the most recent edition of the textbook. And that's going to make a difference because from each new edition makes small adjustments and small changes. And I haven't carefully enough examined the different editions to be able to notice where those changes have occurred. And the reason I want to call that to your attention is has to do with the online multiple choice tests, the first of the grading assignments that I'm going to discuss this morning. So over the course of the semester, along the schedule that I've laid out in this document, a few pages down, there will be 5 online multiple choice tests spread out over the semester, timed to be coordinated with the material as we progress through it this semester. Each test is worth 2% of your grade, and the tests are going to go cumulatively. So the first test covers only chapter 1, the second test covers chapters 1 and 2, and so on. Now they're online, so I understand you're not fooling anybody, and it's designed, it's set up in order for you to do it this way, to have the book open in front of you so that you can flip through the book and consult the book in order to do as well as you can on the multiple choice tests. I've posted a brief video on the course website to walk you through the steps that will get you to the online tests. And so hopefully you will very soon take it, if you haven't already taken a look at that video. It's 2 or 3 minutes, so I mean very brief. And you will do the test very soon. The next item that I want to discuss with you right now are the discussion assignments. There are 4 of those, and that's for a total of 20% of your grade. Again, these are spread out across the semester, and they're a little bit less well coordinated in terms of matching the content of the course. But on the other hand, they are coordinated in order to make sure that all of the different learning outcomes are met through the accomplishment of the work that you've been assigned, and evaluated in proportion to the extent to which they demonstrate you're having met those learning outcomes. Each of the discussion assignments is devoted to or based on you watching a videos that are available to screen through the college library website. So you follow the link on we'll see in a second, each of the video, there's a link to each of those videos. And for each of those videos, I've set up the first one already for the discussion board, and I will include typically, it's not always going to be like this, but on this one it is. I take a quote from the video and I add a comment or a question or a challenge or a rebuttal, some sort of claim that is the purpose of which is to incite you to respond to your understanding of the content of the video, my comment, and also ideally to the contents of the chapter as you read them. And I've laid out in the software, there's a box, and I describe what I'm expecting from you in the discussion board. And on Blackboard, under the course documents, I've also included the rubric that I'm going to use to evaluate the main contribution, the post that is the required performance on your part. I want to call your attention, but I'm going to delay, or I'm going to discuss next week and in the coming weeks the following class assignments. I don't want to devote too much time today to discussing assignments that aren't immediately forthcoming, but I will call to your attention that there will be 2 news analysis assignments, a class reflection assignment that'll be due at the end of the semester, and a group literature review about which I will have more to say next week. Those last 2 items represent the most grades. It's the most highly weighted assignment. They're both worth 20% of the grade. The 2 news analysis assignments, one will be given out soon. The other one will be after the reading break. I haven't found yet the news item that I'm going to use to have you analyze, but it'll be a current event news item, and I will connect that news item to a specific component of the text, chapter 1 and chapter 2, in the case of the first news analysis. And also, I will post a further reading that will provide you with the background information for the analysis that I'm going to ask you to perform on the news item that I'll have selected. But again, I'm going to delay a fuller discussion of that for next week. And as with the online online tests and the discussion assignment, I'll post a brief video, a brief screen capture video showing you the steps to go through in order to complete the assignment and in order to submit it. If you have questions about this, please feel free to jump in right now, or alternatively, you can email me later as you start to do those assignments. The next component, okay, yeah, so here, just to show you quickly what this looks like. And also on the professor's addendum, there's a weekly schedule with the timing of the content that we'll be discussing. So we're going to be covering material from chapter 1 this week and next week. And in the third week of the semester, we'll begin chapter 2. It's a standard practice in post-secondary education, one that I'm anecdotally, I know that most of my colleagues here at Seneca in our program follow, and more broadly, my colleagues in other institutions, for the most part, all do this. We're convinced that it's a lot more productive for students to follow the content of lectures if they've already read the chapter material. What the lecture will not be is a summary of the content. The way this is supposed to work is not that I just summarize for you what the content of the chapter is to spare you the trouble of reading the chapter. There's very good scientific evidence to support the claim that human brains and human beings process information that they process verbally produced information differently than the way they process information that they read. Although we loosely speak of the same content being covered through both learning mechanisms, in fact, there's very good evidence, there's neuroscientific evidence, there's social psychological evidence, there's testing evidence that supports the claim fairly robustly that you learn it's not just that you learn the material differently, but that the material itself is different when it's presented verbally, when I speak it and when you hear it, compared to when I write it and you read it. Both of these mechanisms are crucial for your success in this course. It won't do to just watch the lectures, and it probably won't do to simply read all the material. Both of these methods of interacting with the material are assumed to be what's going on in your case. So in order to be successful, you have to read the material and you have to listen to the lecture. And so the rest of this schedule goes through this with the topic that's covered, the reading material, and the assignments and their due dates as they progress through the semester. Now, the last thing I want to call to your attention in the professor's addendum has to do with accommodation for students with disabilities. Students, and I'm just going to continue using the vocabulary that's provided in the professor's addendum. There are reasons perhaps to be dissatisfied with this vocabulary, but I will just go with this vocabulary for the time being. The college has made available to students and has set up a separate unit, an office with professionally trained people whose job and whose training is to meet the students where they learn. And so if you have, or if you believe you have even a learning challenge that makes it difficult for you to integrate this material, you need to get in touch with the Counseling and Accessibilities Office, make an appointment with a counselor, and then work through with that counselor as soon as you can all of the different modalities, all of the different extra tools that are available to the college and to me and to you in order to maximize your chances to be successful in this course. I'm 100% on board with this. I'm keen to make this work for all of us, for all of you. But I don't see any way around this. The first step has to be taken by the students, and that first step is to reach out to the counseling office, either by phoning them, depending on which campus you are at. Although I guess in this COVID situation, the campus won't matter so much, but it might. So if you know that you're at Newnham, or if you know you're at Seneca at York, it makes sense to phone the appropriate campus, or to just email the email address on the screen in order to schedule an appointment. And then a process will then be engaged, resulting in most cases in a form being filled out, and I eventually get the form, and then I can implement whatever adjustments to the course are required for all of the students to be able to be successful in this course. Okay, so that's it for now for the professor's addendum. I want to turn now to, well, thank you, Patrick. I hope so too. I'm confident that we will, notwithstanding my concerns about online education. So now I want to turn to I'm going to turn now to the PowerPoint presentations, and let's see how I do that. Okay, so that's going to resize. No. Huh. Okay, there we go. So the textbook we're using, as I mentioned, is Soc Plus by Bob Brim, and it's the 4th edition. It says that in tiny print over here. This is what the cover looks like. And so the purpose of today's lecture is to introduce you to the introduction to sociology. And in my other section, I spent quite a bit of time just talking about this first slide. And there's a lot that can be said about this first slide from the point of view of introducing you to sociology. But I'm going to try a different tack this time, and I want to jump in, and I'm going to go to, so we have chapter 1, Introducing Sociology. And I've changed the order of the slides that were produced by the textbook publisher. And I've added one slide. I've added the next slide. Here, I've reproduced one of the sentences from the textbook. So on page 8 of the textbook, one of the first pages, we read the following sentence. All of the natural and social sciences, including sociology, rest on 3 building blocks: theories, research, and values. So this isn't one of the original slides that the publisher makes available to faculty for a number of reasons that we'll discuss in a few minutes. I've added this in. The next slide, though, is from the, but the slide produced by the publisher after this, these are I've broken it up. This slide originally had 3 items on it. It says building blocks of sociology are 1, values, 2, theories, and 3, research. Now, there's a tiny difference between these 2 things. Did anyone notice a difference between these slides and the quote that I read from the textbook? Oops. Damn it. So this is the slide. This is the sentence from the textbook. Well, I'll tell you then. In the slides, the author of the slides flipped the order of the that they were laid out in the sentence in the textbook. And in the textbook, the professor Bob Brim goes on to point out that he uses the example of Albert Einstein. Who's Albert Einstein? Does anyone know who Albert Einstein was? I know you do. I just want to see if. Okay, Patrick, explain what a goat is here. There we go. E equals mc squared. Thank you. Yep. Albert Einstein was a physicist. Smart guy, no doubt. That's right. So GOAT is an expression from sports, and it's the greatest of all time. And so I haven't asked Bob Brim why he used this example, but I think that it's pretty clear. Yes, very good, eh? That's helpful. Albert Einstein is arguably the most well-known scientist of all times. And certainly he was a Nobel Prize winner, and his contributions to physics are enormous. And Bob Brim picked Albert Einstein partly because he's so well known. Bob Brim, that is, reasonably would have expected that almost all the readers of his textbook would know about Albert Einstein. If they knew anything about Albert Einstein, was that he was a great, giant, genius scientist, and that his work is a good example, is going to be a helpful example of how science works. And then in the textbook, he points out that Albert Einstein, the great physicist, whose area of specialty, does anyone know? So E equals mc squared, that's part of what? Does anyone know a little bit about physics? Yes, exactly. So Albert Einstein's large sort of the area of physics that Albert Einstein basically invented is probably the wrong term, is the theory of relativity. He developed first a special theory of relativity, and then he was able to generalize the theory of relativity for everything. The special theory of relativity has to do with objects moving close to the speed of light. And then he was able to generalize the theory of relativity for everything. So the general theory of relativity, and what the general theory of relativity did was it demonstrated that physics in Einstein's day was accurate only up to speeds approaching the speed of light. And as objects get closer and closer to the speed of light, they stop operating according to the Newtonian laws of motion. And so that was a great innovation. Newton had been the reference physicist. Newtonian mechanics was basically the framework within which all of physics had operated for the whole of the 19th century, and enormous increases in human knowledge about physics were made possible by the expansion and the deepening of Newton's insights into the laws of motion. But they were incomplete, and Einstein was able to demonstrate initially in a theoretical way, and then his theories were confirmed by observations of a partial eclipse. I don't remember if it's of the moon or the sun, and I'm absolutely not a physicist, so I don't have a working knowledge of what the actual content of these discoveries are. But all of this is to say that Einstein was a great genius. But following shortly after and sort of overlapping with Einstein's discoveries, physicists in Germany and in England to begin with, and then physicists from around the world developed um, a separate innovation in physics, and that's quantum mechanics. And the textbook cites Werner Heisenberg, who was a German physicist who, along with Paul Dirac and Ernst Schrödinger, they jointly won the Nobel Prize, I think in 1927. But in any event, they came up with a new model of physics that is incompatible with the general theory of relativity. And Heisenberg demonstrated in a very complicated way that I don't understand, demonstrated that the motions of electrons are unpredictable. They're not deterministic, and so there's a certain amount of uncertainty. It came to be known as the uncertainty principle. And what the point that Brim invokes here is that Einstein rejected quantum theory as a full explanation for all of the universe on the basis of values that he held. I think Bob Brim is mistaken about this, but I think he's mistaken about the role that values played in Einstein's understanding of and his disagreement with Heisenberg and quantum mechanics. But he makes an important point about the role that values play in the elaboration of theories and in the development of sciences. And this is especially important in the case of sociology. I'm not quite as convinced as Bob Brim seems to be that it's that important in physics. But at the very least, it's very, very important in sociology. And it's important in sociology in two different ways. In the first, more general way, sociology as a science is a human activity, and humans, by and large, we bring to all of the work that we do, all of the effort that we invest in our existence, we bring to bear consciously and unconsciously the values that we've grown up with, the values that we adapt and adopt as adults. And it's a demonstrable fact that often, it's perhaps not a demonstrable fact that we always do this, but it's clearly a demonstrable fact that we often project onto our work and through our work the values that we hold. So sociology, values have an impact on sociology in that most general way. But values also have an impact on sociology, specifically as a scientific discipline, as a university, as a research area, because values from the very beginning of sociology have been a subject of study of sociologists. So it's not just part of the practice of sociologists in doing their work as sociologists, but as a topic of research. And we'll see briefly today and in more detail as the course develops, the three most widely cited figures as the founding figures of sociology, namely Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and Max Weber. All three of them had an awful lot to say about the nature of human values and the relationship between human values and human experience in society, the structures that through which society produces and reproduces itself. And so values are an internal and an external component to the development of sociology. So I raise this issue Firstly, because I think it's an important feature of sociology that that is an important point to make when I'm introducing you to sociology. But from a process point of view as well, I want to call to your attention that there's a little bit of slippage between the content of these PowerPoint slides and what it says in the textbook. And the third thing, how I have interpreted that textbook. Interpretation is also a key component here. You're going to interpret the textbook a certain way. I interpret the textbook a certain different way. And that's a built-in feature to how all of these things operate. But the most important point I want to make about the difference between the slides and the textbook is that you're responsible for the material in the textbook. So it won't be enough to be successful in this course simply to take a look at the slides. The slides do not cover all of the material in the textbook. They are not intended to be a summary of the content of those chapters. The textbook, one of the reasons I chose the textbook in the first place against other possible candidates that I've used in the past, is that Bob Brim himself has produced a summary of the chapters. And so you don't, to the degree, and it's a limited degree, that a summary is useful, I urge you to take a look at the back pages of the textbook where there's a summary of each of the chapters. That will be a much more useful summary for you than will simply taking a look at the slides. So I wanted to warn you about that. So now the next thing I want to turn to a consideration of these three building blocks of sociology. Now, before we turn to the substance of these three building blocks, I want to make a distinction for you, and I want to call to your attention a distinction that is periodically going to be crucial for you to be sensitive to be aware of in order to follow what's going on. Sociology is the science of society. And so when he says these are the building blocks of sociology, they're not saying these are the building blocks of society. They're not the building blocks of the content of sociology. They're the building blocks of sociology as a science. And so sociology as a science is built up of values, but most importantly, or what I want to focus the rest of my attention to this morning in terms of a building block is the theoretical component of sociology as a building block of sociology as a science of society. Theories are conjectures about the way observed facts are related to each other. Now, what does a conjecture mean? How do you understand conjecture? It's a little bit more formalized than simply how we see things. Often, and it starts as an opinion, but in order to have it enter into a theory, it's an opinion that's provisionally offered as a hypothesis about the way observed facts relate to other observed facts. And then, so what happens is a theory is formulated and then the theory gets tested. So the next stage is research. And that's where you systematically attempt to test this conjecture that you start with. And so most of what most of what is covered in this textbook and most of what I will spend my time with you discussing are the results of the preliminary stages of theory building. So we will be taking a look at not the most cutting edge aspects of sociology as it's practiced in 2021, but at what sociology that's very close to what it is. Roughly speaking, we're talking about scientific method. It's a more controversial feature. One of the challenges that sociology has is most understandable, I think, if we compare it to the challenges that are faced by the natural sciences. So sociology is part of the social sciences and physics is part of the natural sciences. And in physics, physics has developed historically in a way that's very different from the development of sociology, in at least the following sense. In a intro to physics course, and I did a year of science, of natural science at university before I switched to philosophy, as it turns out. That's what my degree is in, philosophy. I specialized in the philosophy of social science, but I started in biology and I took a physics course, and what we started with was Newtonian mechanics. And there's all kinds of physics knowledge that's extraordinarily robust, about which reasonable physicists do not disagree. For example, Newton's, I think it's his third law of motion, but I could be wrong about the number, but Newton demonstrated that force equals mass times acceleration, and then with the qualification, that changes a tiny bit as you approach the speed of light. But here on Earth, force equals mass times acceleration. That's an absolutely received, it's a physicists no longer debate this. There is no reasonable disagreement around that on physics, and physics is full of theories that are no longer debated by physicists. That is a luxury that sociology has not been able to provide itself with. There are no absolutely accepted theories in sociology. All of sociology, from the beginning right up until this morning, is made up of theories that do not have unanimous agreement. And there are a number of explanations for that, some of which we will be looking at as the course progresses. But the facts remain that in sociology, there are many, many different competing, overlapping, mutually exclusive, contradictory theoretical approaches to every single aspect, every single fact, every single observation, every single conjecture. Sociology, unlike physics, unlike much of biology, unlike much of chemistry, doesn't have a set range of accepted principles and laws that on the basis of which it can build more and more knowledge. So what we will be doing is we will be taking a look at a number of theoretical approaches in this course. And so let me just get to that slide here. So the course is going to be taking a look at a variety of different sociological phenomena, almost all of which will have more or less that you in your daily or weekly or yearly or in your lives will have had some kind of contact with. We'll be taking a look at economic issues. We'll be taking a look at, I forget the exact list of the chapters for the first semester. Social organization, socialization, deviance, social stratification, race and ethnicity. These are all social phenomena with which we have all that have interacted with our lives, with all of us. And so these are facts and experiences about which we have made conjectures, and in a more complicated way, that part is unchallengeable. That's just true. It's going to turn out that almost any approach that you might have in your life has already been discussed, debated, speculated about by sociologists. And we're going to try to provisionally organize most of these conjectures into what this textbook refers to as theoretical traditions. And by broad consensus among intro to sociology textbooks, these four traditions can be grouped under these categories: functionalist theory, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, and feminist sociology. And so this morning, for the next few minutes, I just want to call out the highlights of these three different theories. Over the weekend, I'm going to post slightly longer, slightly more detailed videos. I'm shooting for 20 to 30-minute videos detailing the first two of these theories, reserving for a little bit later in the semester videos to discuss and introduce you more in a little bit more detail, symbolic interactionism and feminism. But for the first matter that I'm going to be posting on is functionalist theory and conflict theory. So I'm going to turn to the highlights of those approaches. So functionalist theory, which in a certain way, on a certain understanding of the history and development of sociology, is the oldest and the most widely established approach to theorizing in sociology. It focuses its attention on the interplay between social structure and social function. And so an example of that, an example that's widely used to introduce functionalist theory, is the relationship between the distribution in any given society of the rewards that are attached to particular jobs and the roles, the functions that those jobs play in a given society. So if you take a look at Toronto in 2021, and you take a look at the salaries that are paid to medical doctors, and you compare those salaries to the salaries paid to, for example, sociology professors at a community college, what do you think you would find? So the short version of that is, who do you think gets paid more in Ontario in 2021? Medical doctors or sociologists, sociology professors? Yes. Nope. Profs don't get paid more than medical doctors. Now, Brenda said, hopefully doctors. Please explain that, Brenda. You're right on both scores. It's the hopefully part that is the payoff of the theory, of the sociological theory. Why did you say what good for you? No, it's good. I want to hear it. But Brenda said, hopefully doctors get paid more. They do. You don't have to worry about that. But why is it? So I don't explain risk. It'd be great if you turned your mic on and tried to explain it using your human voice, but you don't have to.
Hey, I guess health risks, catching corona would be a big one, but also just being sued is a huge possibility when it comes to being a doctor for like malpractice. Right? I feel like those aren't risks that you get as a professor so much.
Right. So you're on the right track. Just on that last bit, I mean, the way that malpractice insurance works is that all of the doctors get together. I mean, it's organized by insurance companies, but what the insurance companies do is they get all the doctors together. All of the doctors chip in some money, and out of that pool of money, they pay for the malpractice suits. That could be done the way we cover medical costs in Ontario. We could simply indemnify, we could offer to medical doctors malpractice insurance, and that way we wouldn't have to increase their salaries. I think that the main reason and in a way, COVID is the wrong time to think about this and also the right time to think about this. It would be too late to reorganize the provision of medical care if we waited till after COVID started. One of the reasons that doctors make that much money is because we know we know that there are medical problems that will be normally mostly a personal problem. If I break my arm, it's a drag for me, but by and large, it doesn't matter to any of you. So I need to get my arm fixed. And so I go to see a doctor. When COVID hit, we needed to have in place a whole set of, we had fully functioning, properly trained doctors already in place. In order to have that, we had to have a setup so that we could convince the people who were on the one hand able to learn what was required to be learned, right? So very broadly speaking, and to use a vocabulary I'm not especially convinced captures it exactly, we had to make sure that the people who were smart enough to be doctors were convinced to go into medicine instead of other fields. And we had to make sure that they were prepared to stay in school long enough to acquire all of that knowledge. And the way that we do that is that we set it up so they're going to make enough money for it to be worth their while to do it. Now, the reason we do that, those of us who are not medical doctors, is because we believe that we individually and also we as a society need, in order for our society to continue to operate the way it does, we need to have available to us the services that medical professionals can provide to us. So what that means in theory terms is that the jobs are distributed in our society in such a way that the importance of the job matches the amount of reward that that job provides to the people who are doing it in a way that corresponds to the actual needs of our society. Now, an example of what the functionalist theory then needs to be able to explain. So I think that the most students that are listening right now recognize that it makes sense and it's a good thing, not just for doctors, but even for sociology professors, that doctors make more money than sociology professors. What's a little bit less clear, and so those of you who are studying this class, I think could generally agree. And that it makes sense that there are a number of other jobs that make less money than doctors and less money even than sociology professors, but our society gets by just fine when those jobs are paid lower and therefore attract perhaps or have greater difficulty attracting top candidates. What a functionalist theory would need to explain then, and where there's much wider disagreement, not everybody agrees though, nearly everybody agrees that, say, a heart surgeon deserves more money than a sociology professor, and also that our society is better off when heart surgeons, when we're able to convince highly qualified people to be heart surgeons instead of something else. But what about professional football players or professional hockey players or even professional singers? My music tastes, I suspect, don't line up exactly with many of the people listening right now's music taste. But I guess, name your favorite. Yeah, the NBA. Well, that's an interesting comparison. But I want to go first NBA versus doctors versus sociology professors. How can we explain that NBA players make, millions and millions and millions of dollars, whereas doctors only make hundreds of thousands of dollars? Say maybe NBA players make tens of millions of dollars and medical doctors make millions of dollars, and a sociology prof over her career will make $2 or $3 million if she works for a long, long time. Ballpark figures, really. Well, what a functionalist theory is going to suggest is we need to try to understand what role, what function in a given society does that distribution of rewards suggest. If you take a look at Ontario in 2021 and compare it to Ontario in 1900, you might be surprised to find that the doctors did not make nearly the relative salary that they make today. In 1900, doctors were not that highly paid. And in fact, in 1800, surgeons were trained along with barbers. There's a John Keats. I don't know if any of you know him. John Keats was does anyone know who John Keats was? Just for fun. He was an English poet in the early 19th century, a romantic poet. Yes, a writer, exactly. And now I hope I'm remembering the right poet here. I'm not a poetry expert, but the example is useful. I'm pretty sure it was John Keats. He studied to be a surgeon, but he studied in barber school. The development of medical knowledge in the early 1800s was nothing like what the development of medical knowledge is today. And the contribution that medical science, medical doctors provided to society back then was on a totally different scale than what's happening today. And so doctors did not make anywhere near the money. They had nowhere near the social standing. They didn't have anywhere near the amount of knowledge that they had. So that their reward structure back then, relative to the role they played in society back then, made sense in the same way that it makes sense today, now that doctors' medical knowledge is so advanced and it plays such an important role in our society, and that we agree that it plays that role. That's the values part. In today's society, there's a wide agreement that medical doctors play an important role. But in part, our values in today's society, according to some sociologists and other sorts of people, our values are beginning to shift. And the shift in those values tends to have the effect to loosen the bonds that hold societies together. I'll have a lot more to say, but before I run out of time, I want to switch over to the other main theory that we'll be looking at, conflict theory. So okay, well let's stay with this. I'm going to go over the time a little bit. I want to call the so Ralph asks, going back on the NBA, is there a certain role they have where they get paid more than doctors? It's a good question. There's no absolute answer to that. What is it? What do you think NBA players are paid to do? There's disagreement about this. There's disagreement among NBA players, and there's disagreement among NBA owners, and so on. What is it NBA players do? First of all, Ralph, maybe you could explain what the NBA is. I'm not sure that everyone knows what the NBA is. NBA is the National Basketball Association. It's a professional basketball league based in the United States with one Canadian team. And it's a for-profit, it's a business. The National Basketball Association is made up of, I don't know how many teams, 30 or so teams, each owned by either a billionaire or a multinational corporation. And it's huge money. It's big, big money. And the owners of these teams pay these players on the assumption that, based on the expectation that they will make more money than they have to spend to pay those players. So they get more money, not directly because of the role they play in society, but because of the role that the economic marketplace plays in our society. And so here, basketball players need to be understood as members of they're just part of a business. And that's why they get paid that much money. Basketball players make the amount of money they have in some ways the same way as lots of other fields. They went on strike. They negotiated a collective agreement with their employer, and their employers calculated on their own side what they thought they could live with. And sometimes the way it works in the NBA is player A decides that his worth is greater, and so he negotiates a new contract. And if his current employer won't pay him what he thinks he can get from another employer, he changes teams, and the other employer gives him a raise. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. So basketball players' money and the role they play is through the nature of the marketplace. But now I want to switch over to the other theory, the conflict theory. And the main difference between the two theories is that functionalist theory's central operating assumption is that societies tend to reach an equilibrium, and that societies that have reached an equilibrium develop mechanisms to maintain that equilibrium. And so within the societies are modeled on complex systems that originally, that is in the history of the development of that science, were understood to be like organic structures, like biological entities. In contrast, conflict theory holds that the central model for understanding societies is conflict between groups in societies. And so conflict theory, like structuralist theory, argues that the initial target for analysis is social structure. But instead of trying to connect social structures to stability, conflict theorists are more interested in how different social structures relate to inequalities within particular societies. And so where structuralist theories see equilibrium as the standard mode of social existence, conflict theorists see conflict, change, disequilibrium as the central mode of existence of societies over time on planet Earth. Okay, so we've run out of time, and so every week we're going to meet at the same time. So far, I mean, I'm open to changes, but for now, and if there's any changes, for sure I will alert you. But every week we're going to meet on Blackboard Collaborate for an hour. An hour is the most that I'm told by my superiors that we can do synchronously. And so I will be doing an hour a week synchronously and regularly, but not absolutely every single week, starting this week. I will be posting short videos that will cover in more detail specific aspects of the chapters or of other material as it relates to the subject matter you need to be able to complete the assignments. Okay, so thank you for your participation, for your active participation, and I look forward to hearing from you next week. Okay, have a good weekend, and I will talk to you all next week. Thanks. I'm turning the recording off now.